For our next guest right now, he is the play-by-play voice of the Houston Astros, Todd Kalas, joining us right now on FT Live, and also has brought a lot of good. We talked about FT Mojo during the season when we'd bring players on. Todd, you kind of did that to the organization, right? Because when did you join the Astros broadcast team?
17 was my first year. 7 straight ALCS. It's kind of crazy.
Wow.
So you don't really know what losing tastes like as a play-by-play team guy, do you?
As a play-by-play team guy, no, but I was with some really bad teams before that. I was with the Mets my first year, and they wrote a book called The Worst Team Money Could Buy about that New York Mets 1992 team. And then with those 70 wins, that was the most wins I had for my first 10 years in Major League Baseball. So I paid my dues early, and I'm getting it on the back end here with the Astros success.
Hey, I want to get this out of the way because I loved your dad and everything he did, the way he announced. I want to give you a little bit with what I think he sounded like. Can you give me like a 1 through 10, 10 being the best?
You got it.
All right, is that all right? Let's kick this off. Now batting for your Phils, Bobby Abreu. That baby's out of here. What do you think?
I like it. I give it a solid 8. How about that?
All right, we'll take it. We'll take it, man. I had to get that off my chest.
That was good.
He was the
love
best.
I love whenever anybody brings back memories of Dad. He was so special to me, obviously, and so special to the game, and so special to the city. I always love when people remember him.
And a lot of our fans saying right now in the chat, one of the best voices in the game right now, talking to Todd. All right, so let's dig into the Astros. I mean, we got you here for timeliness purposes too. How shocked were you that they were the ones that ended up with Hector? I mean, we have a lot of respect for how this team's won, especially over the last several years, to maintain this kind of competitiveness. But Todd, they don't usually do this in free agency.
No, you're right, Scott. That was a shocking move for sure. Even within the organization, a lot of people were very surprised. I happened to be on our caravan that day out to Austin, and we were with our manager, Joe Espada, and our general manager, Dana Brown. So we kind of heard rumblings of things happening before it actually got out on social media. And then once it got out, we're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, because they've been straddling that collective bargaining tax line pretty much the whole offseason. For them to go beyond and way beyond that threshold was shocking. I don't think anybody saw that coming. Obviously, it changed a lot of people's attitudes this weekend because we just had Fan Fest and everybody was fired up about the Hector news.
Wait, you guys have a Fan Fest? That's amazing. Teams that do things like that. And the questions weren't scripted, even better. It's amazing what happens when you go to 7 straight LCSs. You don't have to script questions, and you actually can have Fan Fest. So go Astros. Does this give the Astros the best back 3 guys in the bullpen? I mean, you have Abreu, who people really don't know that much about, but you look at him, he was almost unhittable, right? Presley hasn't given up a run or hasn't blown a save in a postseason game in it feels like 20 years. And then you bring in Josh Hector, one of the greatest closers of all time. I mean, that's 7, 8, 9, pretty much locked down for Joe Espada and the rest of the team.
Yeah, AJ, Brian Abreu could be a closer for a dozen to 15 teams in this league. There's no doubt about it. Brian Presley, as you mentioned, I don't think it's 21 might have been the last time he gave up an earned run in the postseason. I think he's like 22 2/3 with a 0 since then. So it's ridiculous how good he's been in the postseason. And I've got Hector, who's been one of the toughest guys ever in terms of opponents' batting average against, lethal from the left side. They haven't really had a lefty the last few years out of their bullpen. So now they have one of the best lefties that's pitched out of the bullpen in Major League Baseball in the last 5 to 10 years. So, yeah, those are nice pieces for Joe Espada to juggle 7, 8, 9. He hasn't decided yet who's going to get the ball in the 9th inning. Could be matchups based on who's up in the lineup, lefty versus righty. But Presley has done the job so well through the years. And now Josh Hector is just incredible to have him in the mix.
I want to get talking about Joe a little bit. He was my third base coach with the Yankees. He's been looking for this opportunity forever, and I think he's the right man for it. I think he's excited for it. Can you talk to us a little bit about Joe and his perspective and what you think he's going to bring to the table for the Astros this year?
Yeah, Todd, I just saw Joe literally half an hour ago before I came on the air with you guys. He's in the clubhouse today. A lot of guys are working out today, getting ready for spring training. He's going down in a couple of weeks. He's fired up. He certainly was the right guy for this job. I mean, he's been filling in that bench coach role for A.J. Hinch and Dusty Baker. He knows the guys. He's been through the wars with these guys. Since he's been here, they've been to 3 World Series. They've been in the ALCS every year, obviously. He's the right guy. He's in the trenches with these guys. He and Altuve are very close. He's going to be perfect in this transition. I can't wait to see him get his first shot to manage this year. I can't wait to see how well this team does behind him.
Todd, do you think he'll be satisfied now and in a good place with the bullpen? Obviously, I love the Hector move too, but they lost, over 200 innings going back to last year, if you include Graveman and Maton, Stanek, and who am I forgetting? One more big name.
Neris.
And
Hector.
Neris, which we can talk about too here included. But what do you think from a depth perspective? Quality, they're good. We feel like those dudes are healthy for the playoffs. They're good. Depth perspective, and I know who I loved years ago. Forrest Whitley, I think, is going to move to the bullpen. Are they okay heading into the season with enough arms?
They're better. They're better with Hector in the back end, but you're still going to have guys that are kind of unproven in that middle part of the bullpen. Forrest Whitley being one of them, has not pitched in the major leagues. He could be a candidate for that middle part of the bullpen. Somebody, if they don't use 6 starters out of the gates, will be moved from the rotation to the bullpen. So that'll be a new role for that person, whoever that might be. It'll be a little different. I think 2 years ago, guys, in the 2022 season, it's the first time, the old adage in baseball is you never have enough pitching. It's the first time I've ever seen a team that had enough pitching. They were locked down in their rotation. They were locked down the entire bullpen. There was a 1 weak link. Usually you have guys, have 3 or 4 guys you use when you're ahead of the game. You have a few guys you'll use when you're tied or behind in the game. They could have used any one of those 8 arms out of the bullpen in 22 when they were ahead of the game. They were that good. So it's not quite as deep as that bullpen was 2 years ago or even last year, with the loss of Stanek, as you mentioned, and Neris and Maton, and now with the injury to Graveman. But they'll be fine with those 3 guys in the back end. If you can get your starter to go 5, then you might only need 1 or 2 guys to get to those lockdown guys.
What are teams going to get? Whoever signs Hector Neris, what are teams going to get? I know how awesome he was for the Astros last year, but what is something that he brings that people don't know about besides a fastball and a split, basically?
What he brings, I'm glad you asked, is one of the best personalities you'll ever see in the game. And he is the best conduit I've ever seen between Latin American players and the guys here in the U.S. I mean, he completely blends everybody together. The first time he got down to spring training when he was signed as an Astro, he got every guy out to dinner. It wasn't just the guys on the 40-man. It wasn't just the guys on the 25-man. It was every minor league kid who wanted to show up for dinner, who was from Latin America. He paid for that first dinner. He talked to them all. He said, this is what I'm about. Whenever you have a problem, here's my number. He is one of the best people on the planet, and he is going to be great for whoever picks him up.
Now, with Hector in the back end, what does this mean for Bregman, who's a free agent next year? Altuve's up pretty soon. The Astros, I know they're never going to be a top 5 spending team. They're always going to kind of be in that fringy top 10-ish area. They do sign guys to contracts. But with Hector locking in, Verlander's a free agent at the end of the year, right? Fromber's right there also. Are they going to be able to keep all these guys and continue this championship domination they've had for all these years?
The short answer is they probably can't keep everybody, but now that they went beyond the threshold of that collective bargaining tax, competitive balance tax, I think they're going to be better off now with their chances to sign more of these guys. I think Altuve was a no-brainer. Jose said he wants to be here. They're going to work out a deal with Jose Altuve. He's going to sign. Bregman, you thought going into this before the Hector signing that might be unlikely because they're right there at that threshold. But now that they're beyond that with Hector, who knows? Maybe Jim Crane says, let's just keep this thing rolling and sign Breggy to a long-term deal. Verlander, even though he is due at the end of this year, does have a clause in his contract where if he does pitch 140 innings, which he seems to do almost every year other than his Tommy John year, if he pitches 140 innings, then he's good for 2025 with a player option. So it could be a pretty big salary cap tax on top of what we have now with Hector. If Verlander gets 140 innings and they sign Bregman and they sign Altuve, and then the next year you got Framber Valdez and Kyle Tucker due. So it's going to be an interesting moving of the pieces here to see how far above that threshold they go.
Is this the first time that I was trying to clarify, because I've seen it in different places, that they are on pace to go over the luxury tax number in a full season?
One other time, and then they got right below it the next year. So this could be the first time they're over it back-to-back years if Verlander makes his innings and they sign Altuve and Bregman. I don't see how they stay under it next year.
Why do you think that's the case? And also, I think sometimes we go a little too crazy about it anyway, because it isn't a hard salary cap, even though some owners treat it that way. The penalty, if you're just going over every once in a while and you're just kind of tiptoeing over, is not that bad.
Well, I think that's how they viewed it. Is they were like, yeah, let's go over. If we go over it once, let's get back below the threshold the next year. Obviously, the more you go year in, year out, 2, 3, 4 years, now all of a sudden you're paying major penalties. So that's what Jim Crane has tried to avoid in the past, whether it was with Jeff Luhnow or with James Click or now with Dana Brown. He's been trying to avoid going over it multiple years in a row. I think, as we mentioned earlier, it's going to be an interesting chess game to see how they do that next year. If in fact they signed both those guys, Altuve and Bregman, in addition to Hector and Verlander and Alvarez and all the other guys that are here now.
I want to ask about Dusty Baker a little bit. I play with him with the Reds. Phenomenal manager, one of my favorite guys. What is with this kind of loss, a guy with this wisdom? I mean, do you think they'll pick up where they left off? Is there something different that's going to happen during the season? Because time and wisdom, a guy that's been around the block before, he's cool as the other side of the pillow. You know, you're going to miss that for sure.
No doubt. We're going to have a lot fewer stories to listen to this season than we did the last 3. Dusty was the man. I mean, Dusty was a guy, as you know, who could talk about any topic you want. Oh, he spanned every culture. He knew more guys in music than people that are even in the music industry. He knew guys in Hollywood. He obviously knows guys in baseball. He knows guys that have great fishing charters in every city we went to. The guy's an incredible worldly man. He is one of the most interesting people I've ever met. We will miss all his conversations, but Joe Espada is a guy that's been in the trenches. I really don't think they're going to miss a beat in terms of how they play on the field. We're certainly going to miss Dusty and his friendship and his stories, but I think Joe is going to be just fine taking that baton and running with it.
My next question to you, did you see this run coming from the Rangers? I know you saw them play a lot. It just seemed like, all right, they're in, you know, what's going to happen next? Guys stepped up. It was Montgomery doing his thing, and then, you know, Evan Carter just going back and forth. They had some guys that just stepped up and dominated. Did you see this coming from them at all?
I did. I thought because it was their second straight year of really unloading in the free agent market. The year before, obviously, was the middle infield with Seager and Simeon. And then all of a sudden, they were stockpiling starter after starter after starter after starter. A lot of them they needed because there were so many injuries to their starting rotation with Evaldi going down and other guys going down. But yeah, once Nathan was healthy and Montgomery was a stud in the postseason, that was a tough out. I don't think the Rangers have done a whole lot this offseason. I don't think anybody else in the division has really done much in the AL West other than the Hector signing for the Astros and Caratini. But yeah, I like the Astros' chances, but I did think back-to-back years with the Rangers spending a lot of money that they really had a shot to be something in 2024. Did I think they were going to win the in 2023? Did I think they were going to win the World Series? No. But I thought they were going to battle the Astros at the AL West. I thought the Angels had a shot to do some damage. I certainly thought Seattle was going to be better than they were last year. But I thought the Rangers really had a shot last year to challenge the Astros for the division.
Yeah, but you still thought the Astros were going to win the division, just like Alex Bregman. You thought the Astros were going to go to the World Series. I mean, you guys are spoiled up there, and down there in Houston now. You know, I remember the days when 2013 the Astros couldn't even win 40 games or whatever it was. So you guys are just spoiled now. What did you make of the Maldonado for Caratini? Basically a trade. You paid Caratini a bunch of money, 2 years, $12 million, to come in and basically teach Yainer Diaz how to be the everyday catcher. Maldonado went on to the White Sox. What's going to be missing? I know, listen, Maldonado was Dusty Baker's, baby, whatever you want to call it. He was like his toy, right? He was like, okay, this is my guy, and he was going to die on the sword for Maldonado, while everyone in the organization and in the fans were saying we want Diaz to catch. So what is Diaz going to bring to the table, and what are the Astros going to miss from Maldonado?
You characterized that very accurately. Dusty, you guys would have loved this as veterans later in your career. Dusty loves veterans. He would never bench a veteran for a young kid, even though Yainer Diaz's numbers spoke to getting more playing time. So you're right. The front office wanted to see Yainer play more last year. Other people wanted to see Yainer play more last year. But Maldi was Dusty's guy. And Maldi was also Justin Verlander's guy. He was also Framber Valdez's guy. He caught those guys starts all the time. So had they brought back Maldi, who was an incredible influence in the clubhouse, and you can never take anything away from what Maldi did all those years getting to the World Series. The last 5 years, the worst the Astros have done is get to Game 7 of the ALCS, and Maldi was a huge part of that. But if Maldi came back, now all of a sudden they wanted Yiner to be the number one guy. But Maldi already has a relationship with Verlander. He already has a relationship with Fromber. You can't really change him to the backup guy if your top two pitchers are going to want to throw with Maldonado. So for them to get Yiner in the mix, they needed to let Maldi go. Caratini is now the backup. And what you're going to see out of Yiner Diaz is the guy who might be one of the top 3 or 4 best offensive catchers in the game next year. He might have been rookie of the year had he had more playing time last year. His defense has improved. He throws very well. He's getting better at framing and calling a game. And I think you're going to see one of the better young catchers in the game here. I'd say easily top 5 in the American League and maybe top 10 in the major leagues in terms of a catcher right now.
I'm going to mix in one fan question. So D-Rod, who's one of our regulars here, kind of two, but they can go together. D-Rod said, would it be better to sign Tucker and Valdez long-term than Bregman and Altuve? And who plays third for the Astros after Bregman, or, if he goes, and really just having to do with what the reinforcements look like? Because I don't think this team is highly ranked per se in terms of their farm system. Although I will say this is one of those clubs that develops and overachieves on that front. I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, crazy how much they've overachieved because they don't get near the top of the Baseball America rankings, and probably rightfully so. They didn't have any first-round picks after paying those penalties for what happened in 2017. But yeah, right now there's nobody that's really pushing to be that next third baseman. I think the closest guy might be Will Wagner. He's Billy Wagner's son, and he's really impressed with how he's moved up in the minor leagues. So we'll see how Will does this year, and hopefully, knock on wood, Billy gets in tomorrow into the Hall of Fame. But in terms of Altuve and Bregman, Altuve is he wants to be here. He's the face of the franchise. I would be shocked if you see Altuve in a different uniform after 2024. Bregman, we'll have to see how that plays out. But yes, the question was, would you rather see Fromber or Tucker as opposed to Bregman and Altuve? Altuve, I don't see going anywhere. Bregman, we'll see. Between Fromber and Tucker, I would love to see them both come back. If it's not possible, I mean, shoot, you've got Fromber who can be as good as anybody every 5 days when he's locked in, and Tucker's going to be an MVP one of these years. It's just a matter of time. So I don't know who I would choose between those two if it's just one.
Okay, fair. So question for you on where this team is at right now and the run that they've been on. Obviously, it was before you got there as a broadcaster, but they went through the pain, right? There was the kind of not old school, but the classic take it all down to the scraps and then build it back up, tanking, obviously, which some teams have done and done successfully. The Cubs did that, of course, and led to a World Series. But there's been almost like half the league following that model since then. Do you feel like the Astros and the Cubs, I guess, to an extent, just because at least they won and they got rid of that curse, set the bar too high, and we're seeing that too frequently? Now the Orioles are the latest example, and every owner's looking around like, hey, let's just do what they did, But I feel like it overall is not good or it's terrible for the sport, because you do lose a generation of fans and you hope that there's a better way. The Astros have been able to say that was just one time, we've got this going now. But I feel like there's some teams that are doing multiple cycles like this. Like the Marlins look like they're about to do it again, and they really only had the one playoff appearance for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, teams have tried it, and Mike Elias went from the Astros to the Orioles, and it's paying off now for the Orioles. I think they're going to have a run for the next 3 to 5 years where they could be one of the top teams in baseball. So it could work for the Orioles just like it worked for the Astros when Mike was working under Jeff Luhnow. But to your point, there's also a lot of examples of teams that have tried and failed and not been able to use those draft picks to really build up their team the way they've wanted to, like the Astros or the Cubs or the Orioles most recently. So yeah, I would love to see every team go for it every year. I would love to see 30 teams go for it. It's not the reality of how teams are looking at things right now, because if they feel like they don't have a chance, they want to try and stockpile those top picks and get better in the future. But it's only worked for those 3 teams and not a whole lot of others that have kind of come and gone through some last place finishes.
And I've got one more for you, because you spent some time, obviously you do every year, in Oakland. So our crew behind the scenes was wondering, did you have an encounter with the famous possum there? How were your surroundings when you were in Oakland? And obviously it's a sad story. We've been covering it a ton on the show here, but what was that experience like for you?
It is a sad story, and they got the possum kind of blocked off now. So they built this little addendum to the left of where the play-by-play guy is, so it blocks off where the possum used to be able to enter the booth. So we never had any instances of any possums on our broadcast table. The crew right before us, though, we got in there right after the Mets went through their thing. So they got it ready for by the time we were in there.
All right. So speaking of your broadcast booth, you have a guy that I played with for about 3 months, and Jeff Blum. Does he ever talk about the home run he hit in Houston and how much he was a big deal for Houston not winning the World Series one year?
That's the craziest thing. And we just had our meeting with Joe, and Blummer was there, Julian Morales, myself. So I just saw Blummer literally right before I talked to you guys too. It's the craziest thing that this guy can be the broadcaster for the Houston Astros and never mention the greatest moment of his career. But he basically can't. He can't, right? I mean, obviously, if he was a Chicago White Sox broadcaster, they'd play it every month of the season, and he'd be mentioning it all the time. But here in Houston, fans just don't want to hear it for obvious reasons. I mean, he beat the Houston Astros in 2005 and led to that 4-game sweep. Every game, as you know, AJ, was super close. But those guys, Blummer is awesome, but he never talks about it here just because it brings up bad memories for the local crowd.
Did you see what I did to your guys' picture in your booth during the season? Did he show you what I put up?
Yeah, that was pretty well done. Well done.
What is it? Tell us.
So there's a giant picture of Todd, Julia, and Blummer, and they're all like this with their rings. They're from 2017. And so I took the White Sox ring and I cut it out and I put it over Blum's ring. So when he walked into the broadcast booth the next day, it wasn't his Astros ring. It was a big White Sox ring. So listen, Jeff Blum got one at bat in that World Series. I think he's only swung one time. Yeah, no, yeah. And I think that was the only swing he took. And he hit a home run in the 14th inning or whatever it was. In the place, killer. He was part of the Killer Bees. Biggio, Bagwell, and Blum. So, it was only fitting the bees were buzzing and Jeff Blum. And then he ends up being the analyst for the Astros. I mean, it's a great story. Every time I see him, I'm like, dude, we got to talk about this home run more on TV. And he, like you said, he'll never bring it up.
And that one swing's got a little statue outside on the south side of Chicago.
That's right. Every time you guys go there,
the stadium.
I'm trying to get the picture of him blowing kisses to all the fans. Instead of the picture of you and Julia and him, there should just be a big picture of him blowing the kiss to all the Astros fans as he runs off after touching home plate.
You're cut from the same cloth as Jeff Bagwell because Baggy, whenever he comes on the broadcast, always tries to get him to talk about 05. And he's like, come on, dude, I can't do
that. They've got titles and all that since. I feel like it's fine. If it's a team that's like always struggling, maybe it's tougher, but I feel like he can pull it off. No?
Without a doubt.
I mean, every time he does, he gets blown up on social. I guess if you don't pay attention to social, it'll be fine.
We were there we go. We were trying to hold off. That's why we kept you overtime here, Ty. We were loading up a picture for you. So
nice. I love it. Yeah.
Send the screenshot.
Obviously, that was to Corey and the 4 girls, but it could obviously you could be taken a different way for Astros fans.
I love it. Well, Todd, you're a good sport, and thanks for joining us on this show for the first time. Love what you do. Listen to a ton of your games and your calls throughout the season. You can follow Todd at Real Todd Kalas. Enjoy the rest of the offseason, and we'll see you in spring training, all right?
Sounds good, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.